Good Friday evening, everybody. It is the Safety and a Sportswriter show with Knoxville, Nate, and Big Joe. And we're here to talk to you about the world of sports, basically the NFL draft and a little NBA playoffs, and much, much more as we get ready for next week's big draft coming up. A lot of question marks, a lot of figuring out where people are going to go, who's going to get what, a lot of quarterbacks being thrown around. I guess outside of Caleb Williams, everybody thinks the rest of the thing is wide open. I don't know. Nate, first of all, how you doing? And before we get down to how was Columbus, Ohio last weekend?
It was great, man. I've never seen that many human beings gathering around for a practice. I mean, they had over 85,000 people there watching the spring game, and it was the first ever nationally televised spring game in the history of college football. So, with all the changes that have been going on in college football, the popularity of the sport continues to rise, and especially with the expansion of the Big Ten, adding in Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA, it's really impacted the importance of the Big Ten and the spotlight on it. So it was great. The defense that the Buckeyes have going on with Jim Knowles, mission accomplished with that. Jim Knowles knows what he's doing. They had the top 3 defense in college football last year, and they got everybody back. So I think the defense might even be better. But after watching 4 quarters of a spring game, I still have no clue who the quarterback's going to be. But they'll figure that out. And with all the talent they have, whoever they choose is going to have a lot of success. The biggest storyline to me, though, is UCLA head coach Chip Kelly quitting his job as the head coach at UCLA to become the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. And, they interviewed him after the game and first question, Chip, why? Why would you do this? And he said, because I wanted to coach football. He said, I during the bowl week preparation, our quarterbacks coach had left to go to another school. The offensive coordinator and OC had left. And he said, so I had to coach quarterbacks. And he's like, I was in the meeting rooms with the kids. I was devising practice schedules and game plans. And he goes, I realized it was the first time in over 4 years that I had coached football instead of dealing with all the other crap. And he said, I realized how much I loved it. And I had to figure out a way to get back to doing that. So he quit his job as the head coach at UCLA to become the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. And I think it's pretty cool.
It is. And we see it, Saban talked about it. A lot of the coaches talking about it. You lose a Jay Wright, you lose a bunch of these guys that this NIL and the transfer portal has made it more of a GM's position than actually coaching and teaching. Yeah. You're basically running a pro type organization. You've got a payroll, you've got things like that to take care of, and meanwhile your team you lose the pulse of it. And it's funny too when you sit there and you think a guy who kind of ushered in a lot of this era, John Calipari, I think he saw the writing on the wall. You and I talked about it a few weeks ago before the NCAA tournament, how he'd become unsuccessful come tournament time, and how much longer were they going to put up with it in the Bluegrass State. And I think he saw the out. He found a way to get to Arkansas. I am sure there's big money down there for him down there. They haven't won since Nolan Richardson, so I'm sure he'll get a lot of money to throw around there. And, he'll get to perform the Calipari, or as somebody called them, Caliponzi magic down in Arkansas.
It's a good time for a change. I mean, I think it's good for John, and I think it's good for the university. He'd been there for 15 seasons. 15 years he'd been the head coach there, and, he'd won a national title. But we saw how fast some of the coaches who had won a national title there got chased out of town. So yeah. I actually was surprised at how long he lasted without, winning another one. But to me, the biggest thing out of all of that was how nobody really wanted that job, Joe. I mean, everyone talks about Kentucky's one of the top 3 jobs in college basketball, and that's a basketball mecca. Well, then why the hell didn't anyone want it? Because they apparently approached Danny Hurley, Danny Hurley. They apparently approached Coach Drew down at Baylor. There was rumors that they talked to Coach Oates at Alabama. I don't know if that's true or not. There was also rumors that they contacted Billy Donovan for the Chicago Bulls, and nobody wanted that job. And they ended up settling with, Coach Pope, who was at BYU, used to play for Kentucky a long time ago. They got rid of a guy but got rid of him. I mean, let's be honest. There was pressure to make a move and to get rid of Calipari. So they wanted to move on from John Calipari because of his lack of tournament success, and they replaced him with a guy who's never won an NCAA tournament game. How does that make sense?
I agree with you. I don't know how Pope's going to do that. It's one thing to win at BYU. It's another thing to win in the SEC. Donovan surprised me a little bit. I thought Billy Donovan was, he's been in the pros for a while now. He's with Chicago. They're in the play-in bracket, trying to make their way into the playoffs. But I thought that it was right for Billy Donovan to go back. I didn't think Danny Hurley would go. I think Danny Hurley, he's a Northeast guy. I know one thing, Kentucky probably could throw more money at him, but I also know that UConn, Jim Calhoun had a nice life up there. He was paid, I think he was the highest paid state employee in the history of Connecticut. And he had he's got his program where he wants it to be. And, he's got in the state of Connecticut, he can't get any higher than where he is. So I don't see why he would want to move.
I didn't expect him to go, but I did
Baylor
think
coach was a little bit more. I mean, he's a couple of years removed from winning the national title. Maybe it would be a time for him to move, but I don't know. I maybe he's happy that he created the Baylor program. Maybe he gets to do his thing down there without anybody bothering him.
Well, the boosters and the administrators, after he was contacted by Kentucky and after he flew up there and then came back home, they had a heart-to-heart with him. We're like, listen, we want you to still be our coach. We're committed to you. We're going to give you a raise, and we're going to give you an excess of NIL funds. And look what's happened in the few days since he left Lexington. He signed Jonas Adu, the center out of Knoxville, from Tennessee, from the Tennessee Volunteers out of Durham, North Carolina, the 7-footer. They sign him, give him $750,000. Not done. Then they go out and get Jeremy Roach, the McDonald's All-American Duke 4-year starter at point guard. Give him $1.3 million. So they've dropped almost $2 million, over $2 million on 2 players, and 2 of the best players in the portal. So I think, that's what happened there. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, given his past success, I think he thinks he can recreate that if he gets the guys. But I was surprised that they didn't get, Billy Donovan, or they didn't get, Oates from Alabama. I thought they would push hard to either get, Nate Oates, or potentially go down to the Plains and get Bruce Pearl out of Auburn. I just was very shocked. Pearl would have been a big name.
Pearl would have been the interesting one as an outlier. Someone mentioned that, and he would make so much sense. I would think him or Billy Donovan. I don't know what's in Donovan's head. I really don't. I know he's a great college coach. I know he's a great basketball coach, and he hasn't gotten near the success in the pros that he had in college. And why he's not yearning to get back down there and do it, recreate his Florida Gator success again, I don't get. Especially, he's in his 50s now. I mean, when does he think he's going to get the Bulls turned around and make the Bulls competitive? When does he think they're really going to be in the running team for championships? I don't know. So,
I mean, look at the Oklahoma City since he's left. They had the best record in the West.
Yeah.
So I just think. I thought he would really get back to college coaching. He's almost 60. actually. Billy Donovan's 58 years old.
Yeah.
He just turned 58, so he's almost 60 years old. I just thought he might want to make another, get another stint in college basketball and see if he could, build another team up and win. Maybe he doesn't want to deal with the transfer portal and the NIL bullshit. I mean, look at all these guys. Coach K's gone. Roy Williams is gone. Jimmy Boeheim's gone. We talked about the coach from Villanova stepping away, and Jay Wright. I mean, a lot of guys, Nick Saban stepped away. I mean, a lot of guys who have the ability to are getting out of the business and want nothing to do with it. And I don't really blame them. I mean, look at college basketball now. Let's be 100% honest here. What is it now? It's a one-year mercenary league.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I mean, Joe, there's guys going out and they're playing on 3 teams in 4 years, 4 teams in 5 years, 4 teams in 4 years. It's happening over, and it's not just the mid-range schools or the low-end schools or the high-end schools. It's every school. Look at UT right here in Knoxville, where I live. They went to the Elite Eight. Their whole team is gone. I mean, they lost 8 of their 11 rotational players. Duke, who went to the Sweet 16, finished the season 27-9. They have lost 8 players since the end of the season. So there's 2 teams that were in the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, and their whole team's gone. So it's not just one location or one spot. It's every single college basketball program, and no longer is there just a core of guys sticking around and then supplementing it with a couple freshmen and a couple transfer portals. It's all changed, and you're flipping your whole roster every season, and it's making me sick because I love college sports, more than almost anything, and it's not. I don't like what it's becoming.
When you think about it, though, in a way, and maybe it's a warped way for me to look at this because I love college basketball as well. Football, it's harder to do this, but I mean, the one thing about college basketball is if you're a quality coach, if you keep getting the talent, you're going to be in it. But maybe it kind of balances out. Maybe that's why, maybe we'll see what happens with UConn next year. They're going to lose a lot of players, and we'll see what they have coming back in and how they reload. But maybe it evens the playing field a little bit, because if you can get 2 players like Baylor just did, all of a sudden now Baylor's got to be looked at as a favorite. They got a great coach, and now he's got talent. So let's see what they do with it. So maybe it helps in the long run. I don't know. I like the familiarity area. Well, I wish I could say the word, but I like seeing the continuity year to year and how these guys grow together, and that's when you see teams really develop when they stick around. But it's the bad byproduct of the NCAA not seeing this thing coming and not being prepared for it. And there's no one man who runs the NCAA that can overlook this thing like a real commissioner and say, okay, let's calm this down a little bit. Let's calm down some of this stuff.
But what are we teaching people? What are we teaching kids these days anymore? What are we teaching them? Instead of staying somewhere and earning your spot and developing as a player and putting in the work, well, you go to a school, you commit somewhere, make a commitment somewhere, you go there for a year, it doesn't work out exactly how you want it to, or somebody else outworks you and outplays you. Instead of staying there and putting your foot on the gas and getting the job done, you bolt and you go somewhere else. And how on earth, think about all the guys, and I think especially, in Columbus, or, the 2 college towns that I've lived in, Columbus, Ohio, Knoxville, Tennessee. Guys go there, they play at that university for 2, 3, 4 years. They develop a bond with the people that live there, the people that are fans of that area. They end up making a career out of it. They stay there for their lives, and they raise their families there. They get a job as a broadcaster. They make a company. They build their company there. They work for the university, whatever. And, the rest is history. Well, how are you going to do that when you're on campus for 6 months or you're on campus for 3 months? It's hard to develop a bond with a kid when he's gone before you figure out what his name is.
Well, the other thing, I'll bring up two big examples. Watching Joe Montana when he was at Notre Dame back in the 70s, he did not become their full-time starting quarterback till I think the third or fourth game of his junior year, and he led them to a national championship. But he had been their most successful quarterback the 2 years before that. But Coach Dan Devine didn't really like him or trust him. But he stayed there, and he eventually led them to a national championship, and we know where it went on from there. Tom Brady played behind, who was it? Drew Henson and the immortal Brian Griese. But he didn't leave Michigan. He didn't sit there and go, oh, let me transfer to Stanford, take a year off, transfer to Stanford, or maybe, go play baseball or whatever. No, he stuck it out. He played for Michigan, and then he gets drafted. I mean, that's kind of, like you said, the character of the kid. Tell me what is he going to fight for his job? Is he going to sit there and want to succeed? I mean, that is the biggest question mark, and we never see it anymore. Spencer Rattler. How many teams has damn Spencer Rattler been
on? He was on 2. He went to Oklahoma and then transferred to South Carolina. But you can use the example of DJ Ugalele, who went to Clemson and had a rocky. He looked really good as a freshman. Got to play some when Trevor Lawrence got banged up. Looked like he was going to be that 5-star blue chip player that he was recruited to be. And then in year 2, things didn't go very well. Now, he took all the blame when maybe not all of it was his fault. The receivers weren't as good. The offensive line was garbage. It just wasn't as good of a football team. And all the blame went on him. Well, what did he do? He bolted and transferred out, which I don't really blame him. That's how it works these days. But he goes to Oregon State, has a pretty decent season there. Well, then Jonathan Smith takes the Michigan State job. Now he's at Florida State. So we're talking about a kid. He's on his 3rd team, in 3 years in college football. And he's not the only one. Cam Ward started his career at Incarnate Word. Blows up, has a tremendous season when he becomes the starter. Rolls that into a successful, fairly successful season at Washington State. Well, then what does he do? Now he transfers. Now he's the quarterback at Miami. I mean, there's multiple guys that are on their 3rd, 4th team in their college careers. I mean, what the hell? What do you do, man? I mean, I don't know how you even meet anybody. I don't know how you know where your classes are when you're in a different college every year.
It's like watching a 12-year-old play Madden football. I'm going to take this quarterback, put him on that team, put him on this team, put him on that team. Put him on my super team. That's what it's become like. It's really crazy, and it really is nuts. And it like you said, it's hard to, luckily you and I, we're the kind of people who root for laundry. We don't root for players. But the generation behind us, you're not going to have the fan bases anymore. They're going to follow their favorite player.
Why would you cheer for, a school? It's hard to be a fan of a school anymore when you don't even know the guys on the team from year to year. I mean, it just makes it very difficult to fall in love with the program. You're going to do what kids do these days. And I find myself doing it. I find a kid that I like and I cheer for him, because what's the point of cheering for a team? It's 5 new guys every season. And it's hard to fathom that this is where we're going. And it's just going to get worse, because this is what basically you're doing. There's 4,000 some kids in college basketball. Over 2,000 of them are in the portal.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's half of them.
That
just said it all. The one thing before we get off of this, I was listening to Calipari's goodbye speech, and he sat there and he goes, "Yeah, I've been at Kentucky, 15 years. I helped 40 players get to the NBA. I graduated 30." I'm sitting there going, "Wait, that's 2 a year. Were those 2 guys at the end of the bench? Good job, Cal. Good job."
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not his fault that none of the guys stayed in school long enough.
I know, but it's just like I would, if I was him, I wouldn't even brought that up. I would have just
no, I wouldn't either. I would
have dropped that. But that's Coach Cal. At least he comes out and says it. All right, let's get into the draft. Let's get right down to it. We'll hit NBA at the end, but we have the draft. Of course, like any draft, the big thing everybody's talking about is the quarterbacks at the top. We've done it. You and I have talked about it a lot here. Caleb Williams looks like he is going to be number 1 unless Could you believe it if the Chicago Bears ever took another North Carolina quarterback after taking Trubisky? I just think it would be so. Although I think Drake May has a higher threshold than Trubisky, I think it would be a hysterical thing to see. But I heard a scouting report on Caleb Williams that was on ESPN radio a couple weeks ago. They were breaking him down, and the guy wasn't really high. This guy he used to be a scout for the Giants. He wrote a book on NFL scouting, and he appears on ESPN radio as a guest a lot during the draft times. And he's one of the ones who helped pick out Eli Manning and things like that. So he does know what he's talking about. And the way he looked at Caleb Williams, I've seen Caleb Williams against Notre Dame. Didn't watch a lot of his games, but he claims that Caleb Williams off script, great, but he worries about him in the pocket, throwing people open, going through his progressions. He says he's wide-eyed, jumping all over his progressions, and doesn't make a really nice progressive look. He'll go like number one. Now he goes number 4. Now he goes back to number 2. Now he goes back to number 3. Now he goes back to number 1. And he sees that as a problem in next level. How much have you seen Caleb Williams? What do you think about him?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good assessment. I mean, he's great when the play breaks down and he has to ad lib and make something out of nothing. I mean, he's one of the best I've ever seen at doing that. But there's not a whole lot of that shit in the NFL. I mean, there's just not. I mean, and I've never, ever seen this kid take a snap under center.
Right.
Okay. I mean, he's been in the shotgun his entire life. What's he going to look like when he has to take a snap from the center and do a center to quarterback exchange and then, do a 5-step drop out of that? I don't know what that's going to look like. Not to mention, it's going to be a whole lot different with the defenses of the NFL coming after him, and there's the size of the guys and the quickness, and I'm not sure how his game will translate. Maybe I'm wrong. The Bears have certainly gotten better around him. They've added a whole slew of guys to the team that Justin Fields never had.
Right.
So that he has going for him. But I just don't know how his game is going to translate. And I have no idea. I don't know how you could sit and look at Jaden Daniels play football this year for the LSU and the SEC conference and then watch the season that Caleb Williams had and put those two guys side by side and come to the decision that Caleb Williams is head and shoulders above Jaden Daniels. I think that's ludicrous. Jaden Daniels, to me, was the best player in – obviously not just me. He won the damn Heisman Trophy, and he had one of the most amazing seasons I've ever seen a SEC football quarterback have, and the Bears aren't even considering him at number 1. That, to me, makes no sense. If anybody has developed their game, and I know he switched schools. He went from Arizona State to LSU, but you know what? His coach left. The coaching staff that brought him in and signed him to Arizona State was ousted. And, it's time for him to make a change. And he did. And he went to LSU. And just like Joe Burrow, there was a lot of similarities between Joe Burrow's transition to LSU and Jaden Daniels. And the two guys developed almost identically from season 1 to season 2. And they both became big-time winners and Heisman Trophy winners from year 1 to year 2. And I think if I was the Chicago Bears and I had the number 1 pick in this draft, I would take Jaden Daniels because not only is he the best quarterback in college football, he's the best pro prospect of any of these quarterbacks that I've seen.
The other thing I would say about him is he survived Brian Kelly. Most quarterbacks don't survive Brian Kelly very easily. He's a quarterback. He's not a quarterback whisperer. He's a quarterback yeller, and he has a very short leash on his quarterback, so it says something for Jaden Daniels to go down there. The one thing I've heard about Jaden Daniels that they're worried about, and I wouldn't worry about it, but because Tom Brady was a stick when he came out too, is that his size. He doesn't carry a lot of weight. They're worried about that, but he's a good runner. He's a good passer of the ball. I don't see a downside to him either.
Yeah, I mean he's tall and he's somewhat thin. He's 6'4", 215 pounds.
Which isn't bad.
But you look at Caleb Williams. I mean, he's probably 6 foot, and he's probably 208 pounds. So I don't both these guys are going to get bigger. I don't have a problem with that as far as putting weight on, but I would much rather have the guy that's got the prototypical 6'4" size that can see over his line.
That's
And
yeah.
I just don't understand how you can look at these two guys and not have some sort of conflict going on in your brain about which one is better. I mean, Jaden Daniels to me not only was the best player in college football, he's the best player in this draft, in my opinion. And I think the Bears are going to be kicking themselves for passing on him if they do.
What about Drake May? Everybody's talking about Justin Herbert. He's a Justin Herbert play-alike guy. Didn't really watch a lot of North Carolina. I saw him on the clips about him. He seems to have all. He can make the throws. He can do everything. A lot of people very high on him. What do you think about him?
This is not Mitchell Trubisky, okay?
No.
This guy is more of a pocket passer than Mitch Trubisky was. Trubisky was kind of a product of the spread offense that he played in. Drake May is a 6'4", 225-pound slinger of the football. And this guy played over 2 seasons as the starter at North Carolina. You think back about Mitch Trubisky at North Carolina, I think he played in 13 games total. I think he started 12. Mm-hmm. Well, Drake May has been the starter there. Now, I know the stats weren't as good this year, but their team wasn't that good, okay? The team took a major step back, and I actually liked the way that he hung in there and kept fighting all year long, even though he didn't have as good of a team. He didn't have as good of a players around him. He kept fighting, and he kept looking at ways to win football games, even though sometimes it didn't work out. I like the way that he hung in there. And, is he ready to start and play right away? I don't know. I think it would probably be better for him to go somewhere where maybe he can sit for a while and learn. But I definitely think he's a good prospect. The big thing about this quarterback position these days is, due to the rookie wage scale, the wage compensation that it's worked out now, teams are willing to overdraft the quarterback position. They're willing to draft a guy in the top 10 that may not even be a first-round guy. He may be a second-round talent. He may be a late first-round talent, and they're willing to take him in the top 10, 15 because they don't have to pay him, the $60, $70 million that they used to have to throw at Jamarcus Russell, that they used to have to give Sam Bradford, that they used to have to give Matt Stafford, these unproven guys, before this wage scale was implemented. So, they if you need a quarterback, you have to go find him, and they want to try and build a team around a kid that's on his rookie contract. So they're willing to, roll the dice and go after one of these guys. I would much rather roll the dice on Jaden Daniels or even Drake May than I would Caleb Williams.
It looks like it's a foregone conclusion that Marvin Harrison is Jr. is going to be in Arizona. Do you think maybe Neighbors could scoot in front of him, or do you agree with it, Marvin Harrison?
I don't see that happening. I mean, I like Malik Neighbors, and I think he is a very good wide receiver. But how do you pass on a guy that is 6'3.5", 212 pounds, and has been, one of the best receivers in college football for the last 3 years? There's nothing that Marvin Harrison does bad. There's nothing that he's, does poorly. He's a very polished route runner. He creates leverage with his release. He's strong. He's instinctive. He has the burst to get open. He tracks the ball well. He makes everything look so easy. And not to mention his dad was a Hall of Fame football player. So he's got the pedigree. He's a much different player than his dad, but he knows what it takes. And, this isn't your prototypical kid that's grown up, with an NFL father. He is a hard ass worker. And I know that firsthand from being around the Ohio State program as much as I have. He wants to be the best. And I think he's going to be a Hall of Fame football player in the NFL if he stays healthy.
All right, next we go to the Chargers. You got Harbaugh coming to town, your favorite boy. He's got his quarterback in play. I heard it was crazy yesterday. I heard somebody actually on New York radio going that the Giants should trade their number 6 pick to the Chargers so Harbaugh can get J.J. McCarthy, and we'll take Justin. We'll take Herbert back. I was like, if you can make that happen, I'm for it, but I don't see it happening. Why would Harbaugh want to? Even if he loves J.J. McCarthy, you have a guy with 3 years of 40 some or 30 something pro starts under his belt, and you're going to take a rookie over him? I don't think so. So, what do you think about the Chargers now? How about them going for neighbors, or will neighbors fall to the Giants?
I think that the Chargers, they need offensive linemen. They've got their quarterback. They're going to stick with Justin Herbert, but they need a lot of help around him. I mean, they do need a wide receiver, so it wouldn't really shock me if they took a Malik Neighbors or a Duzier from Washington. That wouldn't shock me, but I really think they're looking at an offensive tackle. In my opinion, Joe Alt from Notre Dame, Troy Fontenot from Washington, J.C. Latham from Alabama. I just feel like they want to have another tackle opposite of Rashawn Slater.
Yeah, because they hit on him a couple of years ago. Now we drop down to the Giants, who it was funny. I was listening to Joe Shane. He did his press conference yesterday about the upcoming draft. And he actually came out without coming out and just saying we suck. He said, we have a lot of needs. It's like, they asked him about, of course, everybody's, the Daniel Jones watches on. If, J.J. McCarthy might come into the Giants, or would they go in that direction? I can't believe he said, he mentioned Drew Lock as a good thing. I think that was more of a desperation move to me. Daniel Jones, the 1 year he was successful was the 1 year he wasn't healthy. Every other year he has not been healthy. He's been the opposite of what Eli Manning was, which was a man who you could count would show up every week. 2 major neck injuries, a knee injury now, and a propensity for getting hurt. Should the Giants look seriously at, if not J.J. McCarthy, panic somebody?
Well, I'm very confused as to how and why J.J. McCarthy has suddenly become a top 10 pick. He wasn't, and then all of a sudden, they talk about the combine and start saying that he's, one of the best players in this draft, and I don't see it. I watched the kid play a number of games, and let's be honest. I mean, he was the quarterback on the best team in the country, but was he the best player in the country? No. And if I have to look at one position group that struggled on that football team, it was the quarterback position. I mean, there was games. I mean, if you go back and watch the tape against Bowling Green, which was by far his worst game, he threw 3 interceptions against one of the worst teams in college football. So I don't see where this top 10 bullshit about J.J. McCarthy has come from. And I know it's been developed and brought into the fray by people, moving him up, irrationally via all this draft talk. But I think that would be a huge mistake by the New York Giants if they were to do that. They need a lot of help, and they need a lot of help in a lot of areas. First thing is they don't have a big time playmaker, especially with Saquon Barkley gone. They need somebody that can move the needle. So I think this is where they need to go out, and they either need to take Malik Neighbors if he's available. If he's gone, then they need to go and Duzier from Washington. If he's not there, then I think they should look hard at Brock Bowers out of Georgia because, let's be honest. I think their tight end, who they made all these moves to get from
now
the Raiders,
talking about retirement.
He's going to retire, and even if he doesn't retire, he's talking about it. That means you're already thinking about it, and you've got 1 foot in retirement. So I think they need a tight end, and Brock Bowers is head and shoulders the best tight end in this draft.
Yeah, I would not be adverse to that. I mean, they haven't really had a great tight end. I was never a Shockey fan, but Shockey was the last talented tight end they had. My favorite was always Bavaro, but I mean, hey, in the Northeast, never hurts to have a good tight end. That's one of the prerequisites once the weather changes to have a good tight end that a quarterback can look to. How about the Jets at number 10?
Yeah, I mean, where are the Jets going to go? I mean, that's a great question. It just depends what their board is look like and what they're what they're looking for. It'll all come down to who's available, and it's all going to come down to where these quarterbacks go. If these quarterbacks start dropping off the board because people are overvaluing them and overdrafting them, well, then there's going to be a lot of really good players left available, and I think that's going to kind of dictate what happens here. The Jets have several needs, that is for sure. But to me, their main need is probably getting another pass rusher. I know they drafted McDonald last year, but if they're sitting there and Dallas Turner is still available, or Latu from UCLA, I think you've got to look hard at one of those two kids and really think about pulling the trigger on them.
When you look at the Jets right now, I mean, of course, it's all dependent on Aaron Rodgers being healthy next year. If Aaron Rodgers is not healthy, as we saw this year, it's going to be another struggle for them. Even with Tyrod Taylor in their camp, they've got to run it. They've got weapons. Their offensive line still hasn't been totally fixed. And is their defense as good as people rated it out to be?
I think so. I thought their defense was unbelievable last year. I mean, especially considering they rarely, got anything out of the offensive end. The one thing I will say, despite also needing a pass rusher, I think they may look at an offensive tackle as well. And if one of those guys that I mentioned, previously at the Chargers looking at, if one of those guys is available at 10, I could see the Jets taking them, because let's be honest, they whiffed on the guy they took out of Louisville, the big guy, Becton.
Yeah.
He's horrible, and he's a liability out there. I think they're going to move on from him. And what's going to make this season successful for them? Well, you just said it. It's Aaron Rodgers getting back to what he once was. And the only way that's going to happen is if he has time to throw. Hell, he got beat up in 4 plays and was lost for the season. So if you want him to last more than 4 plays, you better put some goddamn offensive linemen in front of them. So I really expect them, and I hope that they take an offensive tackle to protect this guy.
Who do you think is just a draft away from really kind of making a move right now, or what team are you really looking at and saying, okay, this is going to be interesting? Is it like the Bengals? Last year, of course, we had, they lost their best player, or their player number 1A. You got to put Chase as one of their best players too. They moved on from Joe Mixon. T. Higgins is a free agent. 2 years ago, they lost both their starting safeties on that defense. What about the Bengals? Do they have to have a good draft to get back into this?
I think the draft is going to be very important for them because they've got a lot of holes. They lost Joe Mixon, who's been their stalwart at running back for several years. Not to mention, as you mentioned, their 2 safeties are gone. They've lost some corners. DJ Reader is gone, so they've got some holes, and they've got a tough division that they're playing in. I mean, the Ravens are up, the Steelers are going to be a better football team. The Browns are a heck of a football team all the way around if they can get Deshaun Watson back to anything close to what he used to be. So I think 9-8 last year was pretty damn good considering that they didn't have Joe Burrow for the last half of the season. So I think, the draft is going to be important for them. They're looking at, offensive tackle. They're looking at D tackle. They're looking at tight end. They're looking at corner. And then they may draft a wide receiver at some point as well, just due to the fact that, T. Higgins is basically going to be on a 1-year deal. Tyler Boyd is gone. And, they're still trying to figure out a way to get Jamar Chase signed.
How about the team that's really befuddled you for the last 3 years, the Minnesota Vikings? They don't have a quarterback. They what is their plan? Where is their plan? Do they have a plan?
You're asking me?
Yes.
I have no idea. You got to ask their GM, because I have no idea what the hell they've done. They won 14 games and they've dismantled this team ever since. They let Dalvin Cook walk. They've let Kirk Cousins walk out of the building. They let Zadarius Smith get out of the building. Anybody that's any good, they've let leave, and they haven't replaced them. So they need a quarterback. They need an edge rusher. They need a guard. They need a linebacker. They need a detail. I mean, they need everything. They still haven't gotten Justin Jefferson signed. The Packers are looking up. The Bears look like they're improving. The Lions went to the conference championship game. The Vikings are a mess, and the GM up there is the sole reason why. And you re-sign Daniel Hunter to a 1-year deal. He comes back to your team. He gets 17 and a half sacks, and then you let him walk and go to the Houston Texans. So if you're asking me what the hell they're doing up there in Minnesota, I can't answer it because what they're doing makes no sense.
And they're wasting a good young coach too. They're wasting a good young coach up there too, which makes no sense at all.
I feel bad for him because I think he's actually done a very good job with what he's been given. That 1 year, 2 years ago, they won 14 games, all close games. And then the next year they come back and lose their quarterback in, week 8. And they end up finishing 7-10 without anybody else around him. So I think he's done a phenomenal job considering what they've given him.
And we talked about the Chargers already. The Chiefs are the Chiefs and whatever. Two teams that are always intriguing. You got Sean Payton in his second year with the Broncos without Russell Wilson this time. And then you have the Raiders who the hell? There's another team you sit there and you go, what? So where do we think that is? Where do we think those teams are going to look at?
Yeah, the Broncos have a lot of needs, man. You think about it, they let Jerry Jeudy walk, go to Cleveland. They're paying $39 million to Russell Wilson to play for a different team. It's a mess in Denver right now. And as you mentioned, they have to figure out a way to beat Kansas City twice a year. So they've got a lot of draft needs as far as the Broncos go. But I think Sean Payton knows what he's doing. He's just got to get his guys in there. He knows what he's looking for. He's done this before. It's just what quarterback is still going to be around. Do they take a quarterback at number 12, or do they, try and draft guys around him? And I just think they have to take somebody because they don't really have anyone on the roster that they can roll out there. So I think that is going to be one of the most interesting picks of the draft is number 11 with Minnesota and number 12 with Denver, and then 13 with Las Vegas. Those three teams, all three of those teams need a quarterback, and neither one of them have one.
Yeah, well, Vegas is betting on Gardner Minshew, but we know he's a good backup, just he shouldn't be your number one guy. Out in the West, you got the Rams who overachieved last year. You have San Francisco who, let's face facts, they've got to start. The clock's running on them now, even though Brock Purdy's very young. Deebo Samuel's getting, he's about midway through his career. McCaffrey, how many more years is he going to be at top speed? What do you think San Francisco's looking to the draft this year, and what about the Rams?
San Francisco, I'm not real worried about because they've got a strong nucleus of teams. I think their biggest need is obviously on the offensive line. Trent Williams is not getting any younger. It was obvious at times that they needed to add some pieces to that. They also need a cornerback to put opposite Javarius Ward. And I think they need an edge rusher, but I'm not worried about San Francisco. John Lynch has proven to be a very good general manager. He's not afraid to make trades during the middle of the season if they need to. Hell, they got their starting quarterback in the 7th round. So I have no doubts about their validity as a franchise and his validity as a general manager. I think they'll be just fine. The Rams are interesting because we haven't seen them draft in the 1st round in a long time.
Yeah.
They've given up their 1st round pick as long as I can think. But now they've got the number 19 pick overall. As you said, they overachieved last year. They finished 10-7 and played a really, fantastic game in the playoffs. So, they've got some young guys, and they just need to get a corner. And I think if they can, add a cornerback there at number 19, which I think one will be available, I think that the Rams will keep on winning, especially with Sean McVay at the helm.
The one thing is, because you live down in a college stronghold for people. When I talk to you and the people around you from your area of the country, college football. Up here, they just think Brock Purdy. I tell you, you would shoot your freaking radio because they think Brock Purdy was some bum that no one knew about. And I'm like sitting there going, I watched him every Saturday for 4 years, guys.
Yeah.
He was on TV. You could have seen him play, and he was pretty damn good. So
I was kind of shocked he lasted that long in the draft. Exactly. Honestly, I thought somebody would take a shot on him in the mid rounds. I thought he was probably around a 4th round draft pick, just because his last year in college didn't go the way that a lot of people expected it to. I thought he might slip, but I didn't think there was any way he'd get past the 5th round.
I don't know if this comparison will work in your mind, but I know he wears 13 because he loved Dan Marino, and his story. While Dan Marino never became Mr. Irrelevant, but when Dan Marino was being drafted, he went down to way down in the 1st round, and because people thought about it senior year, there was rumors about him, there was stuff like this, no one wanted to touch him, and he turns out to be one of the great quarterbacks of all time. So that's where these draft or pickers and pundits get it wrong a lot, because they're not in the camps. You can't get around to all the camps. You can't. And that's why when I listen to all these guys on ESPN and everybody, the quote-unquote draft experts, it's like, you're not watching all their films. You're not talking to all their coaches. You don't know what these guys are about. You can't be that. You're not a scout. So,
no.
Anyways, what dark horse do you think? Well, who would you, if there's one player out there that you think is right now being ignored or overlooked, any position, who would you want somebody to take a look at?
Like a 1st round type of guy, or what do you mean?
First round.
Yeah, I mean, the guy that I really like is the kid that's actually from up there in Albany, and that's Jared Verse. I love this guy, and a lot of ESPN has him rated like 22 overall, but I feel like he's proven his worth being down there in Florida State, and just being a top prospect. He's put in the work. He's one of the most talented defenders in this whole draft. If there wasn't such a high need for quarterbacks, I think he would go even higher than they have him rated. But if you watch the tape and you look at this kid with the burst he has off his first step, and the bend that he's got, the closing speed, the way that he can use his hands, this guy is ready to play right away. And, I look back at Jermaine Johnson, the kid that the Jets drafted 2 years ago, who was from Georgia and then went to Florida State, became the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. I like Jared Verse more than him. And then that's saying something. I just think he's a little bit better at the point of attack. He's a little bit better with his hands, and he's got a little bit more overall explosion. So I look at Jared Verse as a guy who can come in right away and help a team, from end to end. But really, this draft is very big on wide receivers. It's a deep wide receiver draft. So I feel like, unless you get Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors or Dunzier, those 3 are probably the best. And then below that, I think you've got a pretty deep group that you can pick from. So I wouldn't expect many guys to go after the receivers, in the middle to late 1st round, because you can get a really good guy in the 2nd round. One kid who's dropped a little bit because of a little bit of a slower 40 time than what was kind of expected is Keon Coleman. Another kid out of Florida State. It's kind of scary to talk about, but they were one of the best teams in college football last year till their quarterback went down. But Keon Coleman, he really stepped in last year and blew up the ACC after transferring from Michigan State. And I feel like he's going to be sneaky good and be kind of a guy that goes in the second or third round who's going to come in and make an impact right away.
One thing Shane brought up again in his press conference yesterday was very interesting and very enlightening to listen to. He talked about the wide receiver position and its depth this year. And he also said with the rules on the new kickoff rules, these wide receivers who can double as kick returners, their value is going to go up. He said that's going to make them a very desirable position because, a lot of them are good kick returners and will have the chance to, make a name for himself that way as well. So that's going to be very interesting to watch. In the time we got left, let's do a little NBA basketball because we'll be on just for the draft next week. NBA basketball, I want to bring up, I know you're hurting because of this. I mean, a lot of stars going into these playoffs are not going to be there. Giannis is may not play at all, probably won't, shouldn't probably when you think what happened to Durant when he played on a similar injury. Embiid is playing on one leg, and Zion Williamson, who came back this year and showed again that when he's healthy, he's a force, and he's not going to probably be in there unless the Pelicans stay in. He's probably not going to get played in the playoffs. So that's three big potential stars that could bring the average sports fan to the table that aren't going to be there.
Well, and you left out Jimmy Butler.
Jimmy Butler, too. I forgot.
He got hurt the other night, and he's probably out for the entirety of the playoffs. So Caruso from the Bulls is limping on a bad leg. Damian Lillard is hurt. It's a shame, really. Kawhi Leonard is a little bit banged up as well, and Zion. I'm glad you mentioned him because I don't know if you saw the game the other night against the Lakers. Did you?
I didn't watch it, but
it was one of the most dominating performances I've seen of anybody in the NBA in a long time. And he just took that game over. They were down by 20. He brought them back. He had 40 points. He had 11 rebounds. He had 5 assists. And then he, tweaked his hamstring at the end. And it was very unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in his year, 23 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. That's pretty damn good stats. And, I looked at his stats before I joined you on the air. And, his stats were always there. It's just he's played just 2 full seasons, basically. And, it's a shame. Yeah, hopefully, maybe if they can, get by the Kings, maybe it's not that bad. And, he'll be in there to go against the Thunder and maybe play at least a little bit. We'll see. What do you think about the NBA playoffs this year? Nuggets are sitting in number 2. The Thunder, like you said, a surprising number 1 before we came on the air. What are you looking at in the West? The T-Wolves? The Lakers, it's always LeBron in there, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think that Denver is obviously the favorite, in my opinion. Oklahoma City's had a hell of a season, but they're still a really young team. They've never proven it in the playoffs, so I've got to see it to believe it. And I think Denver's, the team to beat in the West and the whole thing. But they're going to have a tough road to hoe, especially playing Los Angeles in the first round. But I think Denver is got the best chance to come out of the West. And then, Boston is the best team in all of the NBA. And I think if they were ever going to win a championship, I think this would be the year.
Well, my heart goes out to the Knicks. Julius Randle, when you look at how things are breaking right now, it would at least, how much fun would it be? I know you know a lot about history to have like a Boston, New York conference championship. How much would that set the NBA world. I mean, it'd probably be the best thing that's happened in a long time for Northeast basketball.
Yeah, that would bring some eyes to the TVs, and I think that would probably be the best thing that could happen to this playoffs, especially with Steph Curry and the Warriors being out of it, and some of these other guys being hurt. If they could get two historic franchises to meet deep in the playoffs, I think that might bring some eyeballs back to it. But it's a shame with all these guys hurt. I think the Bucks were set up to compete in the East, but now with Damian Lillard banged up, with Giannis probably being out, and Middleton missing most of the season, their chances are null and void.
As an NBA observer, and you observe it and a lot more than I do, you study it. When you look at the health of the NBA today compared to decades past, we can always go back to the Bird Magic days. We can go back to the Michael days, the Bad Boy days. You can go back to when you had Duncan, and then you had Kobe, and then you had LeBron. Is this a good NBA product? Is this a good time for the NBA? Or does the NBA really need some work? Or is it just unlucky? I mean, you think of Ja Morant and Zion. We just talked about Zion. If he had been healthy, and if Ja Morant hadn't had freaked out with his gun problems and then got hurt for the rest of the season this year, is that's what leaves like a vacuum for someone like me who maybe just is an outside observer of the NBA? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the league is strong. I mean, Jason Tatum is a superstar in the making. Devin Booker's, a strong player. Jalen Brunson bringing hoops back to the forefront in New York. Giannis is still playing at a high level. Luka Doncic and, the Joker out of Denver is obviously bringing some of the Euro trash into the fold. And then you got young Anthony Edwards up in Minnesota, who's going to be one of the best players in the NBA if he isn't already. And then if they can get Zion into the fold, Cade Cunningham, some of these other younger guys, get Ja Morant back into the mix, well, then, you've really got some good young players. I mean, the big thing to me is, you haven't even mentioned it, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander led the OKC to the best record in the West. He's averaging 30 points a game, and he's not even, 25 years old. So I think the future's bright.
You were definitely ahead of the curve on that, man.
I called that 5 years ago. When we
I know.
started talking about basketball.
You called it on this show.
People would be like, who is this guy? What are you talking about? The OKC is horrible. Well, they got rid of everybody else. They kept him, and now they're the best team in the West. So,
yeah, and then Billy Donovan's sitting up there in cold Chicago wondering, what did I do wrong? Before we get off the air, of course, this is one of those, how can I say it? It is one of those sports tragedies that it's hard to feel sorry for it. But, I was alive and in my teens when he was playing the NFL. And O.J. Simpson was about as big a star as you could be. And, through his own actions, his own stupidity, he ruined his life. And when he passed away this week, and I never forget, I was looking at the bottom of my TV. I was watching another program, and it was just this blurb that went by. O.J. Simpson, acquitted for his wife and her friend's murder, died today of cancer. They didn't mention about a Hall of Fame, running back. They didn't mention about a former Heisman Trophy winner. They didn't mention about, he was one of the big first superstar athletes to be able to cash in on his fame as a national spokesman for products. I mean, this is how big that guy was. And an actor, he was on TV shows. He was everywhere. And man, it was like, wow, you can't feel sorry for him, but you got to just look at it and go, there for the grace of God, go anybody. I mean, what did you think when you heard it?
I don't feel sorry for him at all. I feel sorry for the families of the two people that he's slain. Yeah. One of the biggest jokes in the history of our country. All the things that were going on right at that time led to that verdict. And people said, that all the racism that existed in the LA Police Department led to the investigation being botched and all that, and that he was, the Rodney King thing had just happened, and that he was vindicated because of part of that. Let me tell you this: what did O.J. Simpson ever do for the black community?
Right.
Nothing. I mean, this guy played at golf at white country clubs his entire retired career because he was in movies and he had all this money from playing the NFL. He didn't represent those people, and he certainly didn't represent them when he murdered those two people. So, as you know, I read a lot of horrible things when he died, and then one of them was victory for cancer. And
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, but I certainly it's hard to feel sorry for him for anything, and anything that happened bad to him, he brought upon himself.
I agree with you. I just think it is so. When I think of two in the 1970s,
That's what.
if you were a teenager, there was O.J. Simpson and Pete Rose, and I'm not comparing what they did. Get me right. I'm not comparing what they did. There were no bigger athletes and celebrities in sports than those two guys, and what the rest of their lives turned into because of a betting scandal, the other because he was a criminal. You just sat there and said, well, maybe Charles Barkley was right when he says, I'm not a role model.
Yeah, neither one of those guys were, because they certainly both wrecked it themselves from being a role model for anybody else.
All right, well, let this go here now. You got any man coverage on maybe do a little mini draft this Sunday or anything?
We may come back and break it down next week. We're still trying to figure it out, but we've got either this week or next week, we're going to have a full breakdown of every player selected in the draft.
Is that Olivia? Tell her I said happy birthday.
I will do it, buddy.
All right. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy the weekend. Go take her out for some ice cream.
We're doing it right now, buddy.
Talk to you later.